Good afternoon. I guess we're ready to start. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to Historic Harrisburg's tribute to Caleb Jackson Jr. and Harrisburg's African American heritage. I'm David Morrison, Executive Director of the Historic Harrisburg Association that has been promoting historic preservation, urban revitalization, and smart growth since 1973. Our work is made possible by many hardworking volunteers and committees, very capably overseen by our Historic Harrisburg Board of Directors. Greeting you here today on their behalf is Historic Harrisburg's Board President, Tom Darr.
Well, good afternoon on what is really a glorious day. No better day to be out here than maybe tomorrow or the day after. And even though there's a chill in the air, it is, I think, warming to see you all here, because being here shows a deserved recognition of Caleb Jackson, a man who has brought to Harrisburg so much knowledge of urban history and of the McCoys, who are working to resurrect an important part of that history. Now, through his years of historical research, personal reminiscences, and presentations, Caleb Jackson has brought Harrisburg's cultural history to our better understanding. And the McCoy brothers and their colleagues are bringing back a significant piece of that cultural history right here in Jackson Square, not only fostering economic development, but also preserving history for new generations to know and see with their own eyes. And we're here to acknowledge those efforts and to thank all. So, on behalf of Historic Harrisburg, we like to be brief. And on behalf of the honorees, I thank you for coming. Please be safe in all ways while you're here and wherever you may be headed. And that's my way of leading into saying I'm going to slip out because my wife is running a Vespers ceremony across the river, and I know where I'm expected. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for your great leadership and commitment to our organization and to our community. And best wishes to Janelle and her program on the West Shore. Historic Harrisburg is very fortunate to enjoy the collaboration and support of our city, county, and state governments, all within a few blocks of where we are gathered today, and all extremely accessible to us and to many other organizations on a routine basis. Bringing us greetings on behalf of the City of Harrisburg and Mayor Eric Pappenfuss is Ms. Nona Watson, Director of Economic Development for the City of Harrisburg. Nona?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, this is so amazing, isn't it? If you know that it's amazing, come on and put your hands together. This is so amazing. It is such a pleasure to be here today to pay special tribute to Mr. Caleb Jackson Jr. and Harrisburg's African American heritage. Thank you, Historic Harrisburg Association, for the invitation and for all you do. We've come here today to celebrate the history of this amazing community and all of the great work that has been done and is being done here with all of the partners. And in the midst of it all, we've come to celebrate one of our very own greats, Mr. Caleb Jackson Jr. Yes, and as I read this, I read it over and over again, and I saw here where it says that he was born April 20th, 1930, and it didn't hit me that this man is 90 years old. How awesome. He looks good, y'all. This proclamation reads as follows. Whereas Caleb Jackson Jr. was born on April 20th, 1930 at Harrisburg Hospital. He first lived at Aberdeen and Strawberry Alleys near the old City Hall, where his father, Caleb Jackson Sr., operated a barbershop. and pool hall. And whereas with the expansion of the capital into the old 8th Ward, which displaced the thriving African American community, and in 1934, the Jackson family and businesses relocated to 1002 North 6th Street, and whereas after graduating from the former William Penn High School, Caleb attended Lincoln University in Philadelphia, where he majored in mathematics, and whereas in 1951, Caleb Jackson Jr. was drafted into the Army, where he served with an all-black battalion as engineer surveyor. Upon discharge, he began a 4-decade career with the post office in Harrisburg. And whereas Caleb Jackson Jr. has over 30 years of extensive community service, he was elected 3 times to the Harrisburg School Board and was appointed chair of the district's Board of Control. He also served as regional technician for the U.S. Census. And whereas Caleb Jackson Jr. has held the positions as trustee of Harrisburg University, trustee of the Historical Society of Dauphin County, a member of the Harrisburg Planning Commission, and a member and past commander of the Ephraim Slaughter Post of the American Legion. And whereas Caleb Jackson Jr., a lifelong resident of the city of Harrisburg, whose roots run deep and knowledge of local and African American history is virtually incomparable. And whereas Caleb Jackson Jr. is a true walking historian with a kind and generous spirit who has made a permanent mark in the Harrisburg community that will live forevermore at Jackson Square. Now therefore be it proclaimed, I, Eric Pappenfuss, the mayor of the city of Harrisburg, express our sincere appreciation as we honor and recognize Caleb Jackson Jr., and be it further proclaimed that I have hereto set my hand and seal this 20th day of September in the year of our Lord, 2020, do hereby deliver this proclamation with all due appreciation in the great city of Harrisburg, capital of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Mr. Caleb Jackson Jr. Yes.
Thank you, Nona Watson, and please convey our thanks to Mayor Pappenfuss for all of his support and encouragement for activities and projects such as this. Today's ceremony here at Jackson Square is as much about present-day economic development as it is about history, heritage, and historic preservation. The commissioners of Dauphin County have been especially cognizant of the value and importance of heritage tourism and historic preservation to our collective well-being, educationally, aesthetically, and economically. Through tourism grants and gaming grants, they are targeting and funding strategic projects that make our community a more attractive place to live and visit. Someone whose entire career has been devoted to this premise, first as executive director of Fort Hunter Mansion and Park, and currently as the Dauphin County's Director of Parks and Recreation, is Carl Dixon, who brings us greetings today on behalf of our county commissioners at this time. Carl?
If you didn't get all that history that she presented so well, I'm going to reiterate some of it on behalf of the commissioners. This is a proclamation from them. We, the Dauphin County Board of Commissioners, are delighted to join with Historic Harrisburg Association and the community at large to acknowledge and applaud Caleb Jackson Jr. and to celebrate Harrisburg's African American heritage as we unveil an outdoor history exhibit at Jackson Square, where Caleb grew up. Whereas a lifelong resident of Harrisburg, where his father operated a barbershop and pool hall, and where he graduated from the former William Penn High School. Caleb has had an unparalleled depth of knowledge about local and African American history and an impressive record of community service. Whereas while he was a young student at Lincoln University, Caleb was drafted into the Army in 1951, serving with an all-black battalion as an engineer surveyor. Whereas a civic-minded leader, Caleb served on the Harrisburg School Board and the Board of Control for many years, helping to establish the Math Science Academy and the acclaimed Sci-Tech High. Whereas this well-regarded historian also has been an integral part of the Commonwealth Monument Project and the Historical Society of Dauphin County, and has served as the past commander of the Ephraim Slaughter Post of American Legion. Therefore, we join the 277,000 residents of Dauphin County in recognizing the remarkable life of Caleb Jackson Jr. and the rich African American heritage in Harrisburg as we come together to unveil the exhibit entitled The African American Business District That Became Jackson Square. And in grateful recognition thereof, we do hereby proclaim September 20th, 2020, Caleb Jackson Jr. Day in Dauphin County. Jeff Haste, Mike Prees, George P. Hartwick.
Thank you very much. Yes, good. I heard you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl Dixon, and we extend special thanks to Dauphin County Commissioners Jeffrey Haste, Mike Prees, and George Hartwick. We are fortunate that numerous local members of the Pennsylvania General Assembly are especially interested in the work that we do and helpful to our efforts in many different ways. State Representative Greg Rothman from the West Shore was here earlier. He and I had an opportunity to talk not only about this project, but about historic preservation interests in Cumberland County. So we appreciate his help and support. State Representative Sue Helm, for example, has played a leadership role in efforts to assure that the large and beautiful campus of Harrisburg State Hospital will continue to be a great regional asset, whose historic, environmental, and economic attributes will be preserved thanks to superb intergovernmental collaboration between state government and the aforementioned Dauphin County Commissioners. We have an official greeting from Representative Helm, which she has asked us to convey to you, Caleb. So here's another blue folder for you.
Okay, thank you.
Our state representative for the city of Harrisburg, Patty Kim, was previously a distinguished member of Harrisburg City Council, and she, likewise, is ideally positioned to affect strategic intergovernmental goals and initiatives. She is a great friend of historic Harrisburg and frequently appears at our events. The former chief clerk of Harrisburg City Council, Oscar Douglas, now serves as legislative assistant to Representative Kim, further underscoring our good fortune in having good friends in all the right places. Oscar, we welcome you now to bring greetings on behalf of Representative Kim.
Thank you very much, David. Let me first say that I am not going to be reading as much as my predecessors because they've said it all. Before I get into the small part that I will be reading, I'd like to say just a couple of things about Caleb Jackson and Jackson Square. First of all, the barber shop that was located here so many years ago was my barber shop. And I remember sitting here in the front chair, looking out across the street at the townhouse apartments as they were being built. That's got to be at least 60 years ago. I think it was 1960, yes. And so I did not know at the time, of course none of us did, that this would become Jackson Square, but that's a piece of history that we can all be excited about. The other thing, of course, is that I had the honor and the pleasure of serving as a member of the Harrisburg District School Board of Control when Caleb Jackson was chair, and there was no one who had more integrity, who had more strength of will, who asked many questions and did his best to educate someone who was new like me on the board, as well as make sure that the children in the Harrisburg School District were protected and provided for. And I think that Caleb Jackson is someone who certainly should be recognized, as well as a historian, as someone who spent a great deal of time molding and assisting and helping and providing for the children in the Harrisburg School District, who have now, many of them, become successful and productive members of this community and of society. Caleb Jackson is someone that I've known for many, many years, and I want to just read a few brief paragraphs because everything has been said already. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the House of Representatives, citation. Whereas Caleb Jackson Jr. is being honored for his dedicated service to the community with the dedication of the African American Business District in Harrisburg as Jackson Square. Now, therefore, the House of Representatives of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania congratulates Caleb Jackson Jr. upon his well-deserved recognition, proudly notes his exemplary record of service and contributions in keeping with the highest ideals of this Commonwealth, and directs that a copy of this citation, sponsored by the Honorable Patty H. Kim on September 15th, 2020, be transmitted to Caleb Jackson Jr. on September 20th, 2020. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mr. Jackson, a well-deserved recognition, and I hope you get many, many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar Douglas, for that presentation and also for your heartfelt personal sentiments about our dear Caleb Jackson. I want to recognize a few other special guests who are here today. Former State Representative Pete Wambach, who held the seat now held by Patty Kim a number of years ago, is here. Pete, there he is. Members of the Caleb Jackson family, distinguished family of Harrisburg, are here, I know. Great, wonderful. Several representatives of the Ephraim Slaughter Post of the American Legion, of which Caleb Jackson is the past commander. Wonderful organization. Numerous current and former board members of Historic Harrisburg Association, people whose volunteer work makes our organization thrive. Thank you. This outdoor venue for today's proceedings was chosen for several key reasons. First, we needed an outdoor fresh air venue that would enable us to comply more fully with CDC and state health regulations pertaining to the pandemic. Furthermore, this locale includes, right here, Caleb Jackson's boyhood home, newly restored by LBR Properties. And we're delighted to see that it's fully occupied and fully leased and rented as a wonderful addition to the residential stock of this neighborhood. And perhaps most significantly, this block of buildings, the last surviving remnant of Harrisburg's extensive and thriving African American business district here in the old 7th and 8th wards, is undergoing a comprehensive and concerted historic preservation effort. These buildings have been on Historic Harrisburg's preservation priorities list for a number of years, and they were even listed on Preservation Pennsylvania's statewide list, important buildings needed to be saved. To make a long story short, it was close to 2 years ago that I met for the first time in the Preservation Pennsylvania offices over on North Street our next two speakers. Their organization, Vice Capital, stepped in where others had been hesitant for many years. Boldly and enthusiastically, they envisioned a revitalized block that would not merely be a major historic preservation project, but a meaningful tribute to Harrisburg's African American business heritage, a heritage in which Caleb Jackson Sr. played a significant role right here and at nearby locations beginning some 90 years ago. Brothers Lashawn and Ron Jackson, one-time football stars at Bishop McDevitt High School, who went on to prominence in NFL professional football, are the first in a growing list of native sons of Harrisburg who are investing the fruits of their success here in their hometown, preserving historic buildings and revitalizing the urban community. While Lashawn is unable to be here today, as it is game day for his current team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, his brother LaRon, who is managing partner of Vice Capital, joins us now to tell us about the project known as Jackson Square. Is LaRon here? He's not here. Sorry that he could not make it. He may get here later, so we'll introduce next Ryan Sanders, who is a partner and managing partner of Vice Capital and RB Development. Ryan not only had a lot to do with putting this project and its team together, but Ryan is the visionary who branded the entire project as Jackson Square, a milestone that we celebrate today. I have had many conversations over the past year with Ryan Sanders, and his passion for this project has been steadfast. Mr. Ryan Sanders.
I feel bad. I'm kind of the shorter version of LaRon McCoy. I'm not 6'4", but just truly blessed to be here for this opportunity. I want to say thank you to Mr. David Morrison and the great folks at HHA, really for uplifting us and giving us the opportunity to really pay homage and tribute to the warm history and tradition here, which we've coined as Jackson Square. From the start of it, though, I have to give mention to a gentleman who I met along the way in travels, Mr. Harry Jones, who worked at the Civil War Museum and was on the board for a number of years. We had many talks late at night, and he told me, he said, Ryan, I want you to meet a really, really nice guy. I said, what's his name? He said, Caleb Jackson Jr. I said, I have no problem doing so, because any recommendation that this man has is one of noteworthy attention. So after meeting Mr. Caleb Jackson Jr. and actually hearing his story and how he's able to recant some of these items, we took a visit here to the properties. And to my dismay, I couldn't understand exactly why these particular properties hadn't been touched in over 40 or 50 years. And the story that was given to me was that these properties were being saved and preserved by a lady named Annette Anton from the Paxton Herald, right? There was a dream and an idea to preserve African-American history by putting a museum here and by being able to find different ways in which we can uplift our culture by being able to show that we can do things through economic development and cooperative practices. I just put together just some very, very brief notes because our biggest thing is we wanted to make sure that we thanked all of the great partners that we have here. Jackson Square, the initial portion of it, though, we have close to about 6 pillar partners that are out there, including LBR, as we just stated. My group, Vice Capital, with Lashawn McCoy and LaRon McCoy, in which they're doing 1,000, and they will be completing 1,006 with their contractor, Mr. Matt Long from Harrisburg Commercial Interiors as well. And RB Development, which is a second company that I started with, the largest African-American construction management firm in the state, Mr. Blaine Stoddard, to complete a proposed project that I'm happy to say has been funded by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency in this last round to help us complete over $14.5 million project. I was able to forward over some ideas of what the particular project would look like, but since we didn't have the necessary approvals, we thought it would be of better standings to not put that out there as of right now. So once again, we'd like to thank Mayor Pappenfuse and his administration. Ms. Nona Watson has been a steadfast help in terms of what we needed down here. Same thing with Jamal Jones. Also City Council, Governor Wolf, and our friends over at DCED, Representative Patty Kim, who's represented here by Mr. Oscar, Senator John DeSanto, the county commissioners that were able to help with blight funds, and then also funds from the last Gaming Board Commission. Congressman Scott Perry was very helpful in support for some of the federal dollars that we were able to receive, along with Senator Toomey and Senator Casey. We were able to really pull together a bipartisan effort to be able to truly get this thing done. So when we come to the reason of Jackson Square, the biggest thing that I put out there is the why. And the definition of why as an adverb is for the reason for what, or what for the what's the reason or what's the purpose. The reason is from German Jackson and Mr. Caleb Jackson Sr. providing economic opportunity advancement and cooperative practices that we are now able to pick up and be able to uplift ourselves, to be able to work with each other, to be able to build commerce, and to be able to give ourselves jobs. They also provided a village for a number of other historical families here in the area, including the Curtis family, the Rowland family, both Jackson families, because originally I thought you guys were all related, you know. I apologize about that. But also the Bethel AME Church that stood there from before, which was called the Bethel Village. And they are one of our steadfast community partners with this. They've been there with us every step of the way to really help to provide some of the historical context, even dating back to the Underground Railroad and to the Civil War. This project will provide hope to a community that feels under siege and has been targeted by COVID-19. Jackson Square looks to provide affordable housing for seniors of 62 years or older and citizens with disabilities. We will revitalize this traditional American business corridor that has been shuttered for over 40 years. We provide 118 permanent jobs, and we'll provide over 180 non-permanent jobs on the professional side to complete this $15 million project. But all of this would not be possible without the backs and the great shoulders of folks like Mr. Caleb Jackson Sr. And I really just appreciate your knowledge and your efforts and how you've been able to help us. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan Sanders. Thank you for mentioning Matt Long, who is a active participant in this project as the general contractor. Matt, we really are so pleased that you got involved early on. And I also want to mention Matt Krupp, who is the prothonotary of Dauphin County and who kind of introduced us to Matt Long a couple years ago. So these wonderful connections that our elected officials bring to our efforts for historic preservation and the efforts of investors such as Ryan Sanders and the McCoy brothers, it's wonderful to see everybody cooperating so thoroughly. Ryan, your team is literally saving these buildings and breathing new vitality into this historic part of Harrisburg. Now, offering our official tribute to Caleb Jackson Jr. is the Honorable Peggy Grove, philanthropist, business executive, community leader, and former member of Harrisburg City Council. Peggy is a longtime friend of Caleb Jackson and of historic Harrisburg, and she was the recipient of this, our highest honor, in 2019. Peggy's imprint is on so many public initiatives and projects in our community, most recently the Commonwealth Monument Project at the Capitol Complex's new Irvis Equality Circle. Others here today were involved as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Peggy Grove.
I'm a lot shorter than most of the people here. Can everyone hear me? Before I begin my words of praise for Caleb today, who is this year's recipient of the Toast of Historic Harrisburg, I would like to take a moment to speak of the Right Honorable Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away Friday evening during the first hour of Rosh Hashanah, which is a high holy day that commemorates the beginning of the Jewish New Year. This Hebrew year is number 5,780. It is believed by many that if a person of Jewish faith passes away during the first night of Rosh Hashanah, that they will forever be considered to be Zadik, or a person of great righteousness. As a champion of women's rights, our Constitution, justice and equality for people of all hues, and those are her words, not mine, and all differences, whether it be sex, age, or any of the other differences that we all know too well from reading our various constitutions, rules of city council, rules of many of the organizations, including Historic Harrisburg. Her death comes at a time in history when our right to vote is again being jeopardized. I fervently hope that her words of wisdom will ring through the hearts and minds of all voters and their political representatives as we face the problems and grave concerns of the day. May her memory be a blessing. Today, as we pay tribute to Caleb Jackson, I can't call him junior, he's 90 years old, and I'm in my late 70s, and somehow the two of us, our paths have crossed many times, and he's no junior to me. He's my compatriot. He's been nominated for this year's Outstanding Historian. Normally, we raise a toast. However, this year, we raise our voices in praise of Caleb for his contributions to the city of Harrisburg. When I spoke to Caleb this week to ask him how he would like to be spoken of or to be remembered for his many accomplishments, which you've heard heretofore, I'm honored to call Caleb a friend, a community activist, and using his words, a Harrisburg historian. I'm going to try and hold on to these pages. It has been noted by so many of you here today who have had the honor of working with and knowing Caleb over the years that he has been and continues to be a vital member of the community, contributing his time, his efforts, and his resources. Harrisburg Historic Association was established, as was noted earlier, in 1973, shortly after the 1972 flood. And many of the businesses on 3rd Street, 2nd Street, almost all of Midtown, all the way up to uptown Harrisburg, were all devastated. Many of them, lots of the small houses and businesses on 2nd Street were doctors' offices. They were wiped out and all moved out of the city. I don't know of any doctors that came back and established their offices again there. Many businesses were wiped out. And the 3rd Street corridor of Harrisburg, the part that starts at Forster Street and goes all the way up to McClay, those businesses were especially affected. And lots of attorneys and other people of means bought the houses in Midtown, and many of them were in horrible repair, and they couldn't find people to buy that wanted to buy them, so many were demolished, some accidentally by fire and some by being demolished with hammer and nails. I, in 1980, took a chance, and at 3rd and Bow Street, which is 2 blocks down Bow Street here, I started a school to help mostly women to get a hand up and get a profession. Lots of people had not graduated from high school. Some had fallen on hard times. Some were divorced or did not have any other means of taking care of themselves other than themselves. And in those days, $5 an hour was a high wage. I started a school with a door, 2 cinder blocks, and the help of the people from Harrisburg, Historic Harrisburg Association. They helped me to ravel my way through City Council, HARB, Historic Architectural Review Board, the Planning Commission, and all of the other things, hoops that you have to go through. I then got to meet Caleb Jackson when his daughter, Erica Jackson, attended my school. She graduated in the early 80s with honors, and I had the honor of meeting her father. Caleb, along with other outstanding Harrisburg historians, Jeb Stewart, and with the digital help from Messiah College and Harrisburg University, have researched and recorded the history of the residents of the old 8th Ward, which was mentioned earlier. 100 of those prominent families and business owners were chosen to be listed on the pedestal that is in the Capitol Monument, which is surrounded by 4 outstanding, or will be. It's surrounded presently by a man and a woman, 2 of the 4 African-American orators who had spoken or were well known in the 8th Ward. 3 are black men and 1 tiny African-American woman who is 5'1", or was 5'1". I found out that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was also 5'1", and I'm 5'1". I'm showing a little bit higher because I have heels on, but I am barely 5'1". So all 3 of us have worked hard in the community. So even if we're small, we can be mighty. This memorial, which is that I spoke of, called Meeting at the Crossroads, commemorates the anniversaries, the 15th of the 19th amendments to the Constitution. Those were what I call the right to vote amendments. Literally thousands of hours have been spent gathering stories, artifacts, and pictures of the 100 families who gave up their homes, temples, churches, and businesses to make room for the extra added on buildings that surround our Capitol. The Capitol was built in about 1905. I'm not quite sure when it was finished, but there was a fire with the first Capitol that was brick and wood, and that was replaced by our present edifice that is one of the most beautiful capitals in the whole world. One of the reasons for this wonderful commemorative monument that we put together was to bring tourists to Harrisburg. But another reason for building it was to revitalize the history of the old 8th Ward and all of those families, those 100 families we are trying to hunt down with the help of Jeb Stewart, Caleb Jackson, the students from Messiah College, and our very own Harrisburg University, who are the last 2 mentioned, are putting together the digital history or our method of being able to retrieve that history for the kids in the Harrisburg school districts, visitors, the families, the descendants of the 8th Ward, as well as all those interested parties in the surrounding counties and the state of Pennsylvania. Perhaps of all the contributions of our historian Caleb Jackson, the educational system that we now see in the city of Harrisburg and some of the things that were done under his chairmanship as the Board of Control and when he served on the Harrisburg School Board. He would oversee the renovations of every school in the district except the William Penn High School where he went. I don't know why he chose that one not to do, but he did. But that's been taken over and is getting a new life, and I'm sure that you'll hear about that in the very near future. The buildings were in deplorable condition. I would go into the schools to speak to the students to get them to come to my school, or later when I sold the school to help educate them about what city council does and other things in the city of Harrisburg. And they felt disrespected and unsafe. Many of the outlets were hanging out of the walls. There were holes in the walls. Parts of the ceiling tiles that had been damaged by rain were falling down. The school was in deplorable condition. And unfortunately, the behavior of some of the students reflected that disrespect. Under Caleb's direction, along with many people in the city of Harrisburg that got together, some of the various businesses helped, everybody got this whole community came together to help to rebuild those buildings. Each one was brought back to life, and they all now stand as a tribute to the Harrisburg Board of Control and the vision of the late Mayor Stephen R. Reed. Mayor Reed also brought forth the idea of the Harrisburg University. And under the Board of Control's chairmanship of Caleb, pardon me, that very creative institution was put together. It now has over 6,000 students. I cannot believe that. I was there at the dedication. I was there when we walked through and when it was being built, etc. I cannot believe that it has grown to that. I mean, the first class had 20 students in it. The Board of Control helped create some very special educational institutions in addition to the Harrisburg University. As was mentioned earlier, the Math and Science Academy for elementary level students interested in the STEM fields, so that they can get an early start. And I did not know that Caleb had majored in math, and that only makes sense that he would spearhead that. Next, along with philanthropist Bill Gates' help, SciTech High School was created. And for those of you who have never been in either of those any of those three institutions, I invite you to visit once they are back open. They're unbelievable, and the things that the students are studying are it's just phenomenal. Followed by the university, Caleb proudly told me that students graduating from SciTech can now enter Harrisburg University free of financial obligation. They must first apply for all available financial aid and scholarships, but the balance normally borne by the student and their family is waived, saving them thousands of dollars in tuition and room and board. And in this day and age with COVID, what a godsend that is to those families. That means that the students graduating this past spring and those that will graduate this coming year who have very unusual sets of circumstance to deal with because of COVID will have the chance to still go to a university. That's unbelievable to me. Yes. For these and all the other myriad contributions, let us stand in tribute to Historic Harrisburg's outstanding historian, my friend, the Honorable Caleb Jackson. Please stand.
Thank you very much, Peggy, for those wonderful sentiments and for all that you do for historic Harrisburg and our community. Peggy mentioned the monument down by the Capitol and the old 8th Ward. I want to mention that this coming Saturday at 10 o'clock, Caleb Jackson, Jeb Stewart, and I are going to be conducting a historic walking tour of all of these features of Harrisburg's African-American history. Meet at 10 o'clock Saturday morning at the Capitol Fountain, and you'll really learn a lot more about this wonderful history and heritage of our community. Now, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce our guest of honor, Mr. Caleb Jackson, Jr.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And this is such a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Dave Morrison, HHA, and their board of directors, the city of Harrisburg, the county, and the state, all the representatives that come and spoke, for Ryan that came and spoke. And I just want to briefly mention that for Peggy, this was a great African-American neighborhood. But right down here we had my favorite Jewish delicatessen, Schulman's. And as my family can tell you, my favorite sandwich is still a Reuben. Yes. Just a brief acknowledgement. Thanks everyone else for coming. I recognize most of you with your mask on. I've seen enough of you. I recognize the faces. So yes, I recognize everybody. So I know you want to hear a little brief. Well, you've heard where I was born, where I grew up. So I'll tell you a little bit about this area that you don't know. And we're going to go back, see these houses here. Well, Jeb Stewart recently put out a map that showed just the Ridge Avenue Church, which was on the corner that became Bethel AME and burned down. We had a map that showed this, and behind the map, not the map, behind the church was a cemetery. In fact, there were two cemeteries, one for the Ridge Avenue, but there was also an African American cemetery there. And that was between 1850 and 1877. And it was the Wesley Union Burial Ground. And Ray Schott, one of the librarians, the state library, and I put together a book that we have on the history of Lincoln Cemetery. So before Lincoln Cemetery, African Americans were buried behind these buildings you see here. They were all moved, hopefully they were all moved to Lincoln in 1877. But this does make this very historic ground. Now, as for the buildings here now, how many of you heard of the Green Book? Everybody's heard of the Green Book. Well, most of these businesses, my father's business here, the barber shop, the Jackson House here, the Jackson House residence, and the Jackson House rooming house, and the other Ruth Rowland's beauty shop that was here, they're all mentioned in the Green Book, starting from 1936. And you know the story of the Green Book. I don't have to give you the story because you know the story of the Green Book. Curtis Funeral Home here is where Major Winfield apprenticed. One of the most well-known undertakers in the central Pennsylvania, Major Winfield. My dad's barber shop is where I learned all the black history of Harrisburg, because the barbers there, Ducky Lee, his father was actually a Civil War veteran. So as you hear in a barber shop, the barbers talk, the people that come to this barber shop were professionals, the doctors, the lawyers, the African-American businessmen, and you heard and saw them in their relaxed mode, and you could understand the stories that they told. Jackson House right here, Jackson House Restaurant. In 1939, Joe Louis was there. And as a little boy in here, I remember seeing Joe Louis going into the restaurant, and the street was crowded. By the way, 6th Street, as you see down here, where the Messiah Church is, that's how wide 6th Street is. There, that's how wide it was all the way to Riley Street. All this area over here were businesses, homes, African Americans, and other ethnic groups. This was all torn down. This was the old 7th Ward. And this is why this is so important, that of all old 6th Street, starting here all the way up to Riley, and I'll mention some of the names of some of the places you may have heard of: Jack's Hotel, the Elks Home, Martha's Turntable, Fuller the Tailor, the Shake Shop, Otto's Atmosphere, all those businesses, all the way up. There you go, all the way to Division Street. They're all gone. Not only are the businesses gone, the buildings are physically gone. So this is why this heritage, what we have here, and thanks to Ron here and McCoy Brothers, the fact, and the others that are restoring this, this is why this is so important. This is why this is the area we can come to and call Jackson Square. These are the original buildings, and it's important that we remember them. If you want to contact, by the way, as Peggy mentioned the book, I just want to show you, we have a book. I want to show you this. And the Midtown Scholar now has this. It's online at Amazon, but I was at Midtown Scholar yesterday. It's Fridays and Saturdays they sell books outside, and this is available for just a nominal price of $10. And you can go online and download it free. So this is about the old 8th Ward that was torn down, and about the things that Peggy talked about. So in closing, again, I would say that I thank you very much. This is quite an honor. It's an honor for me. It's an honor for my family. It's an honor for Harrisburg. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Caleb, we learned a lot just in the last few minutes from you about our local history, but I have to say that I've had the privilege of learning a lot from you over the last 30 years, and I can't thank you enough for how much you have enriched me personally and so many people in our community. Our final piece of business today is the unveiling of an outdoor history exhibit titled The African American Business District That Became Jackson Square. This is the newest of about 120 such outdoor exhibits throughout Harrisburg. The system was initially developed for the city of Harrisburg by historian and preservation advisor Jeb Stewart, who has been called back into this role to help with the restoration of damaged or missing installations and the creation of new ones, all of it with funding via Dauphin County gaming grants to the Midtown Action Council and Historic Harrisburg. I think we're ready. How about we count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Happy Jack's Day.
Hey!
There you go.
There it is. Okay.
Mr. Morrison. Everybody, this concludes our proceedings today. Thank you all very much for coming and for supporting all our efforts to preserve this wonderful city, the capital city of Pennsylvania. Thank you for coming.
Right. Thank you.